Good day and great light, everyone, and welcome to Open Contact TV. I'm Wendy, and this is my husband, Dave, if you're new. And one of the things that we always enjoy sharing is when we have our own open contact experiences. And one of the ways that we begin having contact, which we may or may not even be aware of, is in our dream states. And so, one of the things that Dave and I do when we wake up every morning is ask each other, "Do you remember your dreams?" And so we were just sitting here this morning, and all of a sudden, Dave remembered a part of his dream. And I haven't heard it yet. I have no idea. But in the sharing of this, the idea is just to inspire others to um, pay more attention to our dreams and the messages that we receive in them, I guess.
Yeah, and usually before I go to sleep, I sort of open myself up to whatever communications might want to come through. So it's not so much that I fell asleep and then had a dream. I sort of went to sleep with the intention of communicating, and I remember what it was. And at some point, I fell asleep, probably during the communication. And I didn't tell Wendy really at all what it was because we thought it would be interesting to see uh, her reaction and interaction as I talk about what I dreamt about. And I was putting myself in a vibration of love, essentially. And Yeshua, who is Yahyel, came to me. And he is channeled by Shaun Swanson. And I say that because I immediately recognized that that was who was coming through. And there's a little bit of an explanation which I'll share. Because a lot of times when you make these connections or even do channeling in general, it's not always necessarily the same frequency or representation of the person that you think you're listening to, but you could usually tell. And part of the discussion that I had sort of had to do with that idea. So certainly we wanted to share this with you and how it relates to the idea of open contact and increasing your vibration and being open to more of all that is. So let me begin. The idea and it's funny because we connect with these energies and I sort of hear it in Shaun's voice, the way he channels. It's a permission slip, so to speak, for me to recognize the energy. But I could recognize the energy itself. It doesn't really have to come through in a similar voice or a similar intonation. But essentially what he said was, when you connect with love, love is really the vibration of all that is. And you're connecting then with all that is. And his consciousness is one that connects very highly with the vibration of love. So it would make sense that a connection would be formed with him, and I would say, generally speaking, of the different channels that we hear and we listen to me, his energy really represents a unconditional love frequency. So it would make sense that it would come to me in that way. And he basically was saying to me that because he represents unconditional love, and you could jump in whenever you want and interrupt.
Thinking how as soon as you said Yeshua, and then I immediately felt that vibration. And then when you said Shaun, coming through Shaun Swanson, and we'll put a link to Shaun's information. That's the first thing I felt was this. I was awash in this vibration of unconditional love. It was soon as, and that's all you had to do was say his name, and I could feel it. And especially when you said Shaun, because that is the vibration I feel as soon as I hear, and I can hear, yes, I can hear his channeling of that vibration, and the way it makes me feel is so loved.
And synchronistically, we just heard Daniel Scranton talking about sort of the same idea of whatever permission slip you have to make the connection. It doesn't have to be the name, it doesn't have to be, an image. Whatever connection you find is most comfortable to connect to whatever it is all you really need. And when you're open to allowing these connections to occur, they occur all the time, effortlessly.
And I've had that very experience myself with channeling too. So I vibrate there.
So one of the things he was talking about was because you're choosing to be in the vibration of unconditional love. Of course, he is very excited about being in that vibration, about sharing things from that vibration. And from a technical standpoint, what really happens is when you connect to the idea of unconditional love, you're connecting to all that is, and you are allowing really a part of yourself that associates best with his consciousness idea, his expression of consciousness, but it's really an extension of your expression of consciousness. And so you're really connecting to a greater part of you, which is part of all that is, which he is part of all that is. And those consciousnesses express themselves in an infinite amount of ways. So my connection to that idea and that expression is my interpretation of it, and someone else's is their interpretation of it, because you're never going outside yourself for anything. Everything is always from within, and you're connected to all things, and therefore your connection to all things allows you to experience, partake of, enjoy, connect with, receive information from all that is. You just focus your attention a little bit more to a particular topic or a typical thing, an expression of the consciousness, which all things are. And he was sort of explaining the idea of we all create our own reality, and we all literally create all of our own reality. So we're creating our own stories, and individually, as our individuated consciousness, we're creating a story and I'm creating a story that has the Yahyel and the hybrid children and the Sasani and all of those things. So it's really up to me individually to make a story out of that, to see how it becomes relevant in my story. And it's up to me to really decide how I want these things to unfold and allow them to unfold that way. And individually, I'm making up this story. And because we're all connected to all that is, and we all contain all that is, the way it sort of works from a technical point of view is all of consciousness that is also excited to be part of that participates however they want. And we're allowing those other parts of ourselves to participate in the story that we're creating. From a collective standpoint, because there are individuated consciousnesses, because everything is consciousness. So as we saw a video of some little kid talking about consciousness. You know, a tree is an individuated consciousness. The table is an individuated consciousness. The cells that make up all those things all have their own consciousness and elect to operate together collectively to form the tree, which then is a collective consciousness of the tree. And all these things communicate and work together and share experiences. So from a collective point of view, just by creating our story, just by living the story that we want to create, that is enough of a sharing to where other individuals, somewhat based on like the law of attraction, want to join in on the story. And they might have their own experiences based on a general story. And when enough collective individuals want to share in that same story, that storyline, each character in the story is going to have their own perspective, their own experience, their own storyline, and everybody's the star of their own story. But collectively, we could decide that this is where we want things to go. And the people that are excited about those things sort of join together collectively in some way and share in those experiences. And we don't have to wait for the idea of our experiences being shared with all that is, for all that is to expand. We are collectively sharing these experiences automatically with all of all that is, and that gets to expand from an individual basis all the way up to all that is and all the other consciousnesses that want to participate, and by definition there's an expansion that happens throughout all that is. So the idea of creating this story, and for me that includes the idea of the Yahyel and extraterrestrials and open contact and the things that we will get to experience from choosing a path of having open contact, meeting our extraterrestrial family, friends, that already know about us, that already exist here in our reality. We may not just be physicalizing it in the way that our story has yet to unfold. And we get to choose all these things. And there might be some consciousnesses that are not that excited about that idea, and they'll have their own storyline. And they could coexist with us collectively to a certain point. But at some point, the vibrations of the ideas will be so different that they'll have their reality and we'll have our reality. And whatever happens to separate those out, it has an infinite number of possibilities. We don't need to really focus on or think about how that is going to work. And we talked too about the idea of the hybrid children and how really we're being introduced, because we're open to the idea of the hybrid children, the hybridization program, how we're directly related in some way to this whole idea, not specifically only within our own lifetime here, but throughout lifetimes, throughout experiences, throughout all of time. These things have been thought through and created a bigger story about how things are going to unfold with all of that. So we get to determine what the meaning is for us, and we get to play out that story, and that's individually and collectively that will come together as a whole story, a whole movie, so to speak. And all reality exist simultaneously. So we are getting to move through these realities from a perspective that allows us to have the experience that's relevant to the story that we want for ourselves. That same framework of reality can be experienced in an infinite amount of ways, and an infinite amount of consciousnesses, soul so to speak, are experiencing those things in their own ways. So uh, when it comes down to it, we're always just making it up for ourselves to have our own experience. And as we share these things, we're giving the opportunity for others to participate in it. And I guess if we had the, because we don't really think these ideas, we're from a larger consciousness, these ideas come to us. So we wouldn't get these ideas to create the stories if they weren't going to be relevant, if they weren't going to have other consciousness that wanted to participate, if we were like the only one in the entire universe, multiverse, whatever you want to call it, that had this idea, it would make no sense to pursue that. We wouldn't have the ideas to do these things if it wasn't worth a bigger picture. So uh, when it really comes right down to it, we get to choose what are the hybrid children, what relationships do they have, what relationships do they have with us, what do we want our relationships to be with them, the other extraterrestrials, well, like the Yahyel, the Pleiadians, whoever that we gain knowledge of in some way, shape, or form. We're connecting to the version of them that matches most with the ideas, experiences, and storylines that we're making up. So when you say, I'm connecting to a Pleiadian, you're connecting to this. It could even be an individual Pleiadian consciousness, but the attributes of that consciousness that you would be connecting to, or I would be connecting to, are the things that match my storyline, match my vibration, which is constantly changing. So today's connection to the Pleiadian is not necessarily going to be the same Pleiadian, because every now is new, and every consciousness is making up a new version of themselves every moment. So you're always connecting to whatever is most relevant for that moment. And that also includes the other people that you're experiencing these things with. There's not really any difference between the person you're sitting next to and the Pleiadian consciousness that you're connecting to, or the Yahyel consciousness that you're connecting to. And it's really always up to you to decide what your story is going to be and how that story is going to play out. And by acting on those stories, you're allowing for those stories to physicalize into your experience. And that was a lot of my conversation and dream. And certainly I think I don't know if it's something new that you haven't heard before, but I'm sharing this again to remind everyone that that's really how things work. And it's really the ultimate power that you have to create the reality that you want to experience. And oftentimes it doesn't unfold the way you expect, but unfold it will.
Well, and all of the things that were, all the visions I was receiving while you're talking is very interesting, because I was actually experiencing several things simultaneously. And one of the things was your name. For example, you talk about your story. His Dave's last name is Yellen. So when I hear Yahyel and I hear Yellen, I think that was one of the seeds that you planted for yourself by taking that name. Um, and also, it is not a religious connection, really, not really. I, but that's part of the story, of your story, and and that energy, um, and Dave being Jewish and not Christian in the sense that I find that, but yet again we understand that entity and that energy was many things. But I think that was part of your story too, of just and then additionally, then we talk about from the Yahyel standpoint, I was actually feeling, sensing, visualizing, or receiving images of your Yahyel counterpart being a part of this conversation. And it was almost like I got to meet that version of you just during that story. So there's those little bits and pieces that when we talk about, yes, we've created this for ourselves on so many levels, and now that we're vibrating closer and closer to these other frequencies, we are literally vibrating in, as you said, a whole nother reality where we're able to more deeply see the blueprint reality that we've created for ourselves. We become more and more aware and attuned to the vibration of our own blueprint reality, and how all of us, how intertwined. Although they're our own story, we're also making up, in a sense, the story of all of the people that, as you said, about playing the parts. And a couple of years ago, Dave and I did was it the 70th anniversary of World Contact Day, and Shaun Swanson was here channeling the IL. And so we both have, we both have a deep resonance with his vibration. And I started watching Shaun when it was one of my first, over 10 years ago, probably, started watching him. He was one of the first channels I ever saw. And I literally cried the first time I saw him channel, because just the love that I can't explain what that connection is. And I mean, Dave and I only met 7 years ago. So yeah, so it's interesting, and how he and I also created that whole story, and etc. etc. And as the Arcturian said today with Daniel Scranton channeling, that nothing, and we already all know this. None of this is anything we already don't know. That absolutely everything happens for a reason. It's everything.
And we create these what's the term I want to use? Breadcrumbs to follow, to really just remind ourselves of what we really already know. So as our vibration increases, as we let go of our beliefs that are limiting, we gain access to more and more information of who we are, and that's unconditional love, limitless, and souls of consciousness that time and space does not really play a part of.
Yeah. So, inspiring all of us to just expand our consciousness, because that's all that this all is learning more of who we are and all of the parts that we are.
So I hope you enjoyed our little conversation.
And please share your thoughts.
Let us know what you think. And we always like to hear comments about, what this conversation means to you, what similar dreams you have, how things are unfolding for you in our big play that we're having here on Earth. And thanks for joining us. We love you.
Bye, everybody.
I love you.
Love you.